Ruh-roh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tuesday again, and it's time for MSP Initiative. We are still following up on our monster 7,000+ mile tour that we took across America. Today, we bring back our friend, Mr. Ken Patterson, and now we bring in the one, the only, Mr. Matt Lee, who, by the way, has introduced me to the concept of a beard barber. I haven't had that before. That's new. That was new for me.
Yeah, there are
Yes.
such
So
things.
how's everyone doing today?
It's awesome, man. I'm doing great. How about you, Ken?
I'm awesome. I got the tour bus behind me ready to go,
That's nice.
Feeling
I'm not
good.
helping you take down that awning. Like, I cannot physically help you this time whenever it's time to move. So
Yeah. No, there was a lot of movement for sure. Matt, we've had a bunch of the other guys that were on the bus on at various times, and we've really gotten a lot of different perspectives, right? Because everybody on the bus had a different view of the world. You having come from one organization that turned into a much larger organization, and now from a position where you're talking to companies, you got to talk to people from a completely different mindset, right? Point of view.
yeah,
And everyone knows you as, one of the security guys, the security focused guys in the industry. So I'd love to kind of get like just an intro synopsis on, what you felt you saw on the road and, where you think things were, right? I mean, we're not that far removed, but I'd love to just get your kind of overall opinion.
It was neat, man. I mean, here's the thing. I am not a vendor. I'm not involved in a vendor space that's typically defined as channel, right? I'm a unique situation where I am channel. I mean, I spend most of my day talking to other MSPs or to other people or other partners, but we wouldn't be considered in that, right? And so what was really neat for me was actually to see the other side of what work process goes on for a vendor, right? How much work is going into writing articles? How much work is going into having discussions with partners about the things they need and the focus on what makes you successful. What are your numbers? What are your metrics? What are your KPIs? What are the things that matter to you about getting seats, places, about accomplishing your mission, about driving the value you're intending to drive so you can both show it for the MSP, but also for the people that are paying for it, right? I mean, in that conversation, and I think there's, it's a really unique thing to be able to step on the other side of the fence. Even when you go to a event, when you go to a vendor put on an event that's through one of the major players or one of their own, you don't get that same other side of the glass view. I got 2 weeks of the other side of the glass view, including washing laundry, right? I mean, every single aspect of that. And I think there's a camaraderie lesson to be learned there, though. I mean, I think there is a deeper understanding of how vendors are partners and how they deliver our value to us. And so I think that was a very unique perspective that I was able to have. And I actually took away some very interesting, just thoughts about how we can be better to the vendors in the things they're trying to accomplish so that it does, float all boats, right? So that the rising tide does that. So, yeah.
Well, one thing is for sure, next time laundry detergent, we should bring that along.
Man, you ain't lying. And maybe enough weight on top of that shaky dryer, right? Like just to keep her in check.
Yeah, not all washers and dryers are created equal for sure. What about your hotel experience, Matt? I think there was at least one stop where, I thought you were going to go across the counter and have to clear things up yourself.
There may have been some failures in overall technological systems that put us at a time at 2 a.m. in a very uncomfortable and not very pleasant state about being told we had no rooms that we booked 8 hours ago. But it got sorted out, if you will. And then as we're getting through that, fiasco, we get told we can't park our tour bus. So here we have just fought through this giant pain, and the manager goes, can't park it here. You have to park it over that real sketchy lot with the guy in the crowbar, right? Like it was rough, man. Yeah, there was certainly some frustration, and I didn't wear it well. Let's just put it that way. I was as friendly as could be with the delivered message intended.
Somebody had to do it. And it sounds like you volunteered before anyone else had a chance.
It was a proximity situation. What's funny was when I turned around, I'm like, everybody back on the bus. We're leaving. And then the guy's like, oh, wrong David Lee. I apologize. You do have a room. So I think two thoughts, right? The first thought is awesome. And the second thought is, boy, that David Lee's going to be pissed.
He was right behind us, remember?
Yeah, we got to.
The guy came in.
We got to watch it a couple times.
Yeah, the guy came in, heard you say that, and heard the guy say his thing, turned around and walked right back out.
Yep. Didn't even check in, just said, see ya.
He had a pretty sweet charger, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Man.
So you had a chance to talk to different size people, right, Matt? And and Ken's been sharing his opinion the whole way through, and we got different people who are at different levels of maturity. Not to borrow a page from Mr. Dipple, who I call hashtag Dr. Doom, but operational maturity. So one of the things that we was actually pretty comical, right? Was you're up on all of these breaches, right, and cybersecurity incidents, and it was kind of the topic of the day when we could beat you to the headline.
Yeah, there's a couple.
I think I got you twice.
Yeah,
I got you twice
specifically.
But as you were talking with people, what was the general sentiment, right, from where people are, right? Because there's still a lot. There's still a lot of conversation about delivering getting over the price point objection of some of this stuff, right? I mean, it should be standard practice. It should be part of the bundle. But when you have an existing customer, I'm sure everybody was asking the question, how do you get them to the other side without, having a coronary? I'm sure Patterson has a different opinion on this, but since you're Mr. Security and you were talking to people about this very topic, what was the general sentiment on that?
So you have a couple things to unpack there, right? Like, where are people on it? I think there's not an MSP today that doesn't say, man, I need to deal with security somehow. I don't think there's anybody at this point that could say that. If they are, then good on them. But, the thought process is, I think the overall understanding of the lack of knowledge is there. I think the problem is that fairly universally, you either have fairly universally as an organization, the knowledge isn't there. I think that's a fair statement. Even if you were to look at Iconic as an organization, the knowledge isn't there. Are the tools there? Yes. Are we having our clients consume those stacks? Yes. Are we doing those pieces? Yes. But if you asked an infrastructure admin what a principle of least privilege or what role-based access control or discretionary, non-discretionary, all of the things, just a nomenclature of security, the actual words of security, the things that we need to understand so that you and I can speak the same language and understand each other aren't there, right? And so what's happened is you see this rise up in the market of democratization of tools where you can buy the tools, you can get some professional service and help. But you hit on it perfectly, George. The communication layer, the ability to help a client partner understand the value of what you're doing. Because it's not just tools. I always say this, a box of Ferrari parts doesn't make a Ferrari. I still have to have a mechanic, a shop to put it together in, the will to put it together. All of those pieces have to come together in one concert to make it happen. Security is the same way. A customer partner doesn't just deliver their end product. There's an orchestration along that space, whether it's something they physically make, whether it's something they intellectually make. There's a process. Security is a process, and it requires the partner being involved. It requires us being involved. It requires us thinking about it and setting up the stage for success. But I would say that it doesn't matter the size of the MSP today. None of us are good at conveying a correlation between business productivity and business risk and cybersecurity needs and the things that have to change. We're not good at it. Right? I think that's a altruism across the board, even pointing fingers internally.
A lot, Ken, I mean, your community call's been going on since March, and we've heard all sorts of stories on that call, right? From MSPs who have not hit themselves on ransomware, to their customers getting hit, to their customers wiring money to who they thought was their vendor, was a third party bad guy, to multi-factor authentication and single sign-on has been. I know Matt's real big on the SSO tax conversation. Yeah. I mean, why is it so hard? Is it because there's just too many islanded tools and they just don't all talk to each other? Is it because there's, again, the pricing concern we mentioned just now? Like, what is the general roadblock?
I don't want to cut Ken off here, but you literally just codified it yourself. Even your questions were scoped around the tools, their cost, and their application, when I would be so better served going to a client and saying, let's talk about a business impact analysis. Let's talk about what applications you use. Let's talk about their criticality. And let's understand how I protect them and how I make them available. right? If you're an MSP that understands confidentiality, availability, right? You're starting to understand the CIA model, right? You're starting to understand that, I can have it available, it's confidential, right? I have those things. And when you start talking about it, you sell the tools, you sell the service. We are not understanding that it's not about the tools, it's about the actual blocking and tackling of caring about your applications, defining their criticality, understanding their risk to your business organization, and overall codifying an understanding of risk. If you do that first, I don't say, damn it, I'm about to die and this blood pressure medicine's $250. I buy the blood pressure medicine because I believe in the death. Clients and us don't believe in that. We believe that we can buy a tool and it solves it. But you have to have that old regimen. If I just bought the blood pressure medicine and consumed a ton of salt and ate red meat and did all the bad stuff that does bad things to your blood pressure, then I didn't holistically solve the problem. I treated a symptom of the problem. That's what we don't understand as MSPs. It's dawning on all of us to understand. For forever, vendors have brought us the tools. They're right. We need them. I can't go and cut down a tree without an axe, right? I can't do those things.
Hey, George, Matt's got this. I'll see you later.
I'm sorry, Ken. I apologize. I get animated time to time.
So Ken, assuming
No, he's
you agree to everything
right.
he just said, right?
Yeah, I agree. Of course, I agree with everything he just said, and that's what I was going to say. It's not that hard. What's hard is the understanding part. The problem is that we have the same problem we all discuss. We talk about level of maturity for an MSP. We talk about, we throw that term trunk slammer gets thrown out a lot, right? It's because this widespread difference of maturity levels for MSPs, and I believe it's easy from a standpoint of what Matt just said. Anybody out there listening who's confused about this part of it, get things in line first. The BIA should be the very first thing, right? You should be doing these business impact analysis. You should be going with gut analysis, the gut matrix. You should be doing SWOT, all these processes to determine what the real problem is, to prescribe what you need, right? Instead of diving in and saying, I have all these tools and this should help.
But in all fairness, Ken, right, these acronyms you're throwing out there now, that's not part of a lot of people's onboarding process. They're scanning the network. Maybe
that's what I'm saying. It should be, is what I'm saying. You're right. That's the problem. How do you go into some place, make to Matt's analysis, it's perfect. How do I go in and say, hey, Matt, you got high blood pressure. I can see your face is turning red. Like, that's how I'm doing it. Yeah. That's it. I didn't do any tests. I didn't, it's the same idea. And you didn't get my
buy-in, right? Because you didn't do those tests.
Right. And so it's the same idea. Everything that Matt just said is 100% spot on. And George, you're right. But it's simple. It's very simple. Learn what the processes are first. To become a doctor, you have to learn how to diagnose a problem. That's what we're missing here, the diagnosis. We're just going in and saying, man, you need security. You need all this stuff. This is what's going to fix your problem.
So Matt, what does the onboarding process now look like? If you're going at Icon, maybe it's not proprietary to Iconic, but if I'm going in to look at a prospect who went to my website, filled out a form and said, I need help, and they're just talking about somebody helping them with IT, how does the prospecting, site surveying, kind of process look like now to incorporate the security stuff?
So let's, to unpack that and just focus on the actual prospect / conversation, right? Assuming that you have a full stack and you want to sell X dollars a seat for that full stack and you don't want to delineate. Let's assume that's the parameter for this conversation, which I think it should be, right? So you come in with this conversation, you have this probably fairly highly priced product, right? That you have to have people understand. Well, imagine you're selling Air Jordans, right? There's been a lot of work to make that an icon. There's been a lot of work to have people instantly see that and go, that's the next Air Jordan, I gotta get them. They don't think about the price, they understand it. What we have is a problem that we're selling something they don't understand. They don't understand that their view of risk has been wrong forever. But I think if you focus on selling from a security perspective, even without all the nomenclature, let's just say honestly, there is some degree of boy, somebody execute me for this, but fake it till you make it capability here, right? But let's just say that the prospecting now becomes trying to help people understand how a cybersecurity framework even works, right? If you're a small to mid-sized business and I ask you, do you have fire insurance? The answer is gonna be, yeah, I have fire insurance. If I ask you the next question of, do you have kerosene lanterns on all very precariously placed locations? Yes. Are they all burning? Yes. Are you playing kickball inside during said? Yes. Have you put papers on the floor to conveniently allow? The problem is that we don't have a way to show people stuff they've written off in their mind. I don't understand technology, so I don't want to think about it. But we can show them those things, right? There's very effective solutions to bring that down to help people understand. One of them, I hate giving the ubiquitous plug, but ConnectWise's framework for selling cybersecurity through Jay Ryer's team is the house, where they say, okay, let me talk about my house, right? I have defend, identify, protect, detect, right? All the pieces of a cybersecurity framework, but I'm going to apply them to a house. I'm going to say, okay, how do I protect my house? I have a yard sign out front that says I have an alarm, right? I have doors that close the holes we go in with our bodies and out with our bodies. I have locks on those doors so they stay locked. Right? Those are all things. When you get in, how do I defend it? I have a shotgun. I have a German Shepherd or two, right? I have things to defend. And so what you do is take people through that journey to understand the words, the defend, the identify, detect, protect, right? Identify would be, I have a list of my crap. That's a business impact analysis. It's a list of my crap. Now when you're prospecting, you know what those craps are and what they are to support. So you've already gained that. So I would say that a prospecting journey takes them through the understanding nomenclature aspect of just what is cybersecurity, right? It'd be very smart to put your tools in each of those boxes so that you can say this is what they do and correlate that. But then you get into here's how we do prospecting. I'd love to talk to you about your business. Great. What do you use as your main way to pay your employees? And just get canned questions that get the information of what's important. And then ask questions like this. Okay, George, if I took away, you said QuickBooks for payroll. If I took away QuickBooks for 6 weeks, what does that do to you? Holy hell, it's horrible. I can't live. What about a day? We probably get through it unless it's payroll day, but even then, people will be okay. We'll figure it out, make paper checks. Okay, cool, got you, right? That just established your restore point objective, your restore time objective, or at least your restore time objective, not your restore point objective. But you can also start talking criticality. If someone says, I need this up in 15 minutes, the criticality is higher than something 6 weeks. Right? And so you can start talking about that. And then what you do is you sell through that story and say, hey, that's awesome. Our backup through blah, 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 blah is amazing at this. And it removes how long you've got to wait on that. Now, how long back would you need to go if this was missing? Do you need to find out about Johnny and the state of QuickBooks 3 years ago? Or do you only need it the last 2 weeks? Or is it, where's that? Great. Our tools do that. We've already got that. You start correlating the benefits to something they had already written off. They didn't understand risk. But I guarantee if you tell somebody you have fire insurance, does that mean you're going to kick over a kerosene lamp? No, I'm not kicking over a stupid lamp. Yet you do it every day by not having two-factor. Yet you do it every day by not having a baseline on your devices. Yes, you do. So all of those things are things where you start to correlate and slap them with it. Hell, I don't mind that aspect of, let me just give you something and correlate it to something you already said. It's called closing the gates, right?
Matt, primarily what you just said has been more you talking to business decision makers, check signers, C-level people, owners, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
This is more of a interview style question and answer. This isn't, I went and I ran some sort of other special tool on their network to figure these answers out, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think there's a component for adding contextual data like that. It's great. It's nice to be able to show where somebody's failed. But the point is, what if you took the conversation away entirely? Instead of it being about where someone succeeded or failed, and I found patch level 7's not done, this is going to scare the shit out of you. They're not wrong, but how much context did that have if I'm just going to spin the plate better and they're still not engaged, right? You have to get that engagement at the very start, in my opinion, right? And I'm struggling to make sure my people understand this too. But if you start having that conversation, it's not a sales cycle anymore. It's a constant cycle. Right? You've got them on board. Now it's the pieces that get me lower blood pressure so I can stop taking the medicine. It's the pieces that, right? It's those aspects that allow me to continuously be a value add in the business. Guess what we just described? Trusted advisor. The entire pivot that has to come in this entity, or we don't make it, in my opinion. We're not going to be able to spin plates and hide what we do for long enough.
Yep.
Yeah,
Brent, it's 100% the right way to go.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the business becoming more consultative.
Yeah, our favorite checker in Brent says, it's establishing a rapport with the prospect, talking to them in their language, and then obviously taking in their concerns. Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, so let's
getting their buy-in, to Brent's point, right? It's getting them involved in the process.
Well, it's about them. You're not talking about you and your stuff. You're talking about their stuff, right? Yeah. What matters to them? Oh, that matters to you? Oh, we can protect that with X. right?
Exactly.
It's more doing that, a deeper dive into what their needs are, because that's really what it's supposed to be about in the first place.
Yeah, and it often comes into, oh yeah, we do that, and that would normally be a $20 endpoint cost, and we're already that's already part of our stuff. Like, you know, and they start doing that subtractive analysis to go, holy crap, that's a value. Like I couldn't even go get all these things and administer them with the FTEs I have.
So Matt, I guess the big question is like, let's say you're an MSP who's maybe not all the way down to, hey, I'm still selling per device per month and stuff like that. But maybe they're not all the way to the point where all the security stuff's buttoned up and they're mid-agreement and they now have to go back to their customer and almost re-interview them, right?
No doubt.
In order to have the conversation, right? Because otherwise, again, the biggest hurdle we hear all the time is, hey, in order to actually plug the gap, it could be another $25 to $45 to $50 per user per month in additional things. And now you're going back to your existing customer and asking them to spend more when it's something new that's out of the field. I mean, how does that conversation go in your opinion?
You know, I think you hit a nail on the head of what everybody's fear is, and it's an actual problem, right? You're negotiating from a very soft position in a lot of cases. There's the reason we talked about before, an educational barrier, in the sense that you haven't done enough to have them believe that the kerosene lamps are there, right? You haven't done those things to help educate and say, not having two-factor authentication or not having these things in place are ridiculous. You need this piece in. Not having an AI-based antivirus that can actually do some type of response with humans means that you're going to have this risk as a problem, right? And I think that if you don't have that agreement, you can't sell it. There's nothing to sell, because they don't believe in the risk. They don't believe in that this mitigates said risk, right? Because they don't believe in the risk. And so I think you're seeing a changing of tide in that, where the consumer is starting to understand that. And I think this is a better time for a mea culpa in this world than we've ever had before, right? If you start explaining and saying, yeah, how many times, and just do the data is beautiful. There's a dataisbeautiful.org that'll show you the breach load, and you can do it by year. So you can show a year of 2010 and show a year of today, and it's just dots on a screen and how big they are. You've seen my background with that before. Well, if you look at 2012 compared to today, which is presumably when you made your last massive change to your tool stat, or 2014 or whatever, and compare those two to the client, you'll look at a breach load of tiny not touching dots to, oh my hell, these are overlapping, the whole world's on fire. Not to create that FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but just to say that my job is to help you understand the landscape is changing. Do you have changes in your dump truck costs, or do you have new licensure agreements that you didn't have before doing business, or do you now have to pay for this when you didn't used to? That is the evolvation of markets. So first off, you have the evolvation of markets, and secondary, you have this massive shift in the overall threat landscape dropping down to the SMB from the corporate space. Oh, and guess what? The corporate guys have been doing this and reassessing their budgets ad nauseum for the last 20 years. We are the failure. We as MSPs and we as SMBs are the failure in understanding the risk. As the risk pivots down to the SMB, we have not adapted properly.
But it's a unique time, Ken. You were running an MSP for a long time. You hear this all day long. You have, hey, I want to start adding more stuff to secure you. Oh, by the way, we're in a pandemic and, I'm trying to save money, right? These are opposite forces that don't go well in many cases. What are you like? How do you combat that from your perspective, Ken?
Yeah, I think I agree that those are opposite forces, but I also agree that there are, if you're choosing some verticals that can rise even during a pandemic like we've seen, like clearly, if you were only dealing with dentists, you were in some serious trouble, right? The dentists, you couldn't go to the dentist and have their hands in your mouth during this type of a pandemic like this. So, that hurts. But if you were dealing with, doctors that are a little bit more critical in nature, those guys started to do in-home appointments, right? We started to get video medical calls, right? And started to add that on. So those guys needed to be secured and needed to have things happen in place a little bit faster. So, I mean, yeah, sure, it's easy to look back now and say, oh, I should have did this vertical as opposed to that vertical. But it also leads into our conversation of don't lock yourself into one vertical either. You can still be good at multiple verticals and do other things so that you make sure you have that balance. So if one vertical takes a hit, you're still good somewhere else. The main thing is, I think Matt can add to this as well. That climb that you're talking about was something that would have taken us years to get past before all this happened. The pandemic multiplied it times 5, maybe 10 times, pushed it that far into the future, where now every single person is like, we need to get our people working from home. We need to have them be secure. This cloud stuff is for real. We're going to need it to protect us. So from that perspective, that's where the balance comes in, right? You have more people that need more of that. And yeah, there's going to be some projects that are going to take a hit, as Matt has alluded to us before. Some projects slowed down, but other projects picked up with this cloud type stuff. And Matt, I'll let you answer that question, but I also have an add-on to that. After all of this, right, we pushed to the cloud, we're talking about single sign-on, and then yesterday Microsoft goes completely down and we can't work.
Boy, that tasted bad yesterday.
Yeah, it definitely did. And so, do you foresee there being some kind of backup to a problem like that? Because I got to be honest, being down for 3 hours, 4 hours was painful.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that answer, because there's a good. I actually have some really interesting thoughts on that. But to the original question, I think the stopping of spending and contraction of the economy. I mean, let's just be honest; they're both going hand in hand. Not to get political in that conversation, but those two pieces are temporary. I think what comes out of this, it really is the 3 phases Microsoft has identified. And I guess I'm being the douche and cutting off the 4th one, but I'm calling it the 3. Right, so we have your react, right? We did that. We reacted. We sent people home. We set up VPNs. If we were in the case of BVoIP, we're significantly more prepared, and SIP just follows us, right? We have those things. And then there's the recover. We're in recover now. I mean, I'm not saying we're in recovery. I'm not saying this is done, but I'm saying we're in the understanding that we have to start building the pavement, and the ones that are healthy will spend, and the ones that are not healthy will die or will potentially survive and go through some pain, right? But you will see this contraction. We're already seeing it. We're seeing it from a revenue number. We're seeing it from, we're seeing it. As this plays out, that will continue. But I proffer that we already have some really neat conditions in front of us as MSPs. Prior to this COVID situation, I was already standing up saying there's studies out there that say we're at 50% to 60% greenfield out there right now. And now we've got a subset of these giant pool of companies that have never touched MSP. Even if half of the companies died in the world, those other half are a potential replacement, especially as we get into the recover and reimagine stages, right? Microsoft's reimagine is so pivotal in this conversation because we can do things different. I don't have the same paradigm. I can hire someone somewhere else. I can protect at point of use. I've redesigned my network that I might not need an office, and I'm going to reduce $35,000, $40,000 a month in spending, and I'll put that into my people at their house, and I'm going to spend $200 stipend a month for them, and it's going to be significantly cheaper, or it's going to be a distribution of that, or it's going to be a different experience. So I think what's going to happen is it's very nebulous. This is going to change a lot over the next year because of this catalyst, right? What happens in a chemical equation when you put in a platinum catalyst? It explodes, it goes exponential, it changes faster, it's hotter, it's finished faster. We're going through a catalyzing process from the exposure to the COVID catalyst. And it's already played out in ways we couldn't have ever predicted a year ago. And certainly in 2, it won't look the same. So I think we're in the middle of this ability to redefine yourself as an MSP in correlation to having to win and make up for the loss in business, or change to make up for the different landscape. I mean, we're in change. We get to make it what it is. And people are in a very malleable state because of that change, right? So I think that there's some really neat stuff that comes. Now, back to yesterday, which was a giant poop sandwich, right? They always say don't nibble. We had already planned for a lot of this in the sense that we had already codified our critical asset list with what our escape clause from SSO would be, at least if nothing else here for some of them. But the thought for me kind of dips into an understanding of decentralizing IDP, potentially, where you're able to, either through blockchain methodologies or other things, bring 2 services in conjunction as an underlying single source of truth, outside of today's deliverable capabilities. But I do believe that there's the need. One of the things we even kicked around was seeding a separate IDP and feeding the IDP into the other SAML applications, right? Because I'm totally single sign-on. And so we either have OIDC or SAML connections to all these applications. If we had a backdoor into those applications that was protected in a way that made sense and was scalable, combined with the ability, whether that's through their support or whatever it is, to validate oneself and change to another IDP, or even better, to make the IDP a load balanced solution, would be some really cool architectural changes coming, but not today. Today, you kind of got a single source of truth, single point of failure combination problem. right? And that's what that was yesterday. Single point of
Yeah.
failure of all my identities and single source of truth that failed. So, right.
And to be fair, Matt, they had a similar issue with being able to sign in and out of Office or Microsoft 365 applications in Q1 and Q2 when there was a certificate issue, right? So the same result, different issue, right? It wasn't the same problem in both situations.
Here's the cool part, and it's one that's not going to be popular with you, is that when you are you or private cloud that's outside of Microsoft space, you are absolutely a rounding error in the overall size of things. So if they're down universally on LinkedIn, I had people going, yep, me too, bud, time to go play golf. Looks like, and so you have this somewhat of a, oops, economy pause. And guess what? We've proved economy pauses work, baby. I mean, oh, wait, no, maybe we haven't. But the point being, I do believe it's that too big to fail. Government cloud was involved, right? Even though there was these major issues, you have a certain critical mass estimate, right? That gets created almost, it's okay. The only reason we're pissed when our systems are down is because our clients are pissed, our systems are down and theirs are not, and they have problems like that. But if we're all down and it's ubiquitous, nobody's gonna come over here, you son of a bitch, you set me up for this Microsoft. No, it's Microsoft, like this sucks.
Well, you know, Google was down too, by the way. Google had issues as well. So it's kind of an interesting thing that
I think if we unpack this further, we're gonna find this was a lot.
And the SSO problem obviously caused issues for everybody, ConnectWise, like all the tools that were using SSO all got affected by it.
It exposed the weaknesses of stuff that works whenever those sessions break, though.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm not here going to go scream that, you know, Microsoft doesn't have problems. They're not perfect. They never have been. And I don't.
Nobody is.
To be. But from the terms of backup, right? I obviously have a very unique view where I'm like, hey, listen, if I'm you know, tunneling into Teams, right, and adding flavor onto their existing offering, and Teams goes down, hey, I'm still processing behind the scenes, right? I've already have a built-in failover mechanism for what I do. But that's not necessarily the case for all things, right? I mean, so it does double down though, right? We've said it a couple times about things like backup. You know, like I had a customer of an MSP. I was on a conference call and they're like, hey, you know, like if we want to move our server to the cloud, then what happens to backup? We don't have to worry about that, right? We can just shut that off. And I'm like, no, that's not the case. Just
now backup design needs to be outside of that footprint, right? Like now you need to start thinking about how you protect backup against systemic failures. And that is
so all my contribution to the call was you're just moving dollars to another component, right? There's no, hey, I'm doing it to save money. No, I'm doing it to be more agile, but that doesn't mean that I'm turning this off. I can't just put all my food in one basket kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and I think there's some really interesting solutions out there, right? Like, I mean, even if you think about email and file level, look at Dropsuite or Skykick and the things they do, right? They're absolutely building out-of-band platforms that I can go into and see my data, especially think of like SharePoint. I redirect all my files to Share. Well, if they back that up and I can at least in name go get to them and have an identity that is available to be split from your single sign-on if necessary, allows you to have a kind of out-of-band platform, not just backup. And so I think you said it right. Makes me more agile until my heels are cut and we're all dead, but I now can go and run my continuity of operations. The neat thing about this is all of the titled pieces, all the titular aspects of what we just talked about are things that you should learn in cybersecurity, right? A business impact analysis, getting that into a business continuity plan. And then for a much longer answer, a COOP, right? A continuity of operations plan. And once you know those things, you know, yesterday at 5 p.m., we kicked off our business continuity plan internal at Iconic. We scheduled our next step when we were going to start carving apart services at 5 a.m. this morning, right? We stepped those in. Why? You know, I'll bring it back to the Boston police chief after the bombing, right? He actually went into cybersecurity, ironically enough. And what he's done is he stood on the stage a couple of years ago and he said, you know, the reason we were able to solve this so quickly, to bring the perpetrators to justice, was not because we had great police on the ground or because we responded well. It was because we spent 363 days planning, getting reciprocal agreements with the FBI, getting our plans in place of how we were going to respond in certain eventualities, tabletopping those eventualities, extending those failures and correcting them and being better at that. What I'm telling MSPs today is that security is really just the blocking and tackling language of what IT has been all along. We've talked about technology. We've talked about the availability part. We've talked about the usability part. We've talked about those things, but not talking about the confidentiality part, not talking is why privacy laws exist. It's why we don't have backup set up the right way. It's why we don't think, but if you start down this path, you will pivot to become the trusted advisor you need to be to survive not spinning plates, right? I'm not going to do servers forever. I'm not going to put patches on forever. I'm not going to do those things. Those things are systemically being solved, right? They're being solved by adoption of SaaS. How much easier it is for you to write one big Teams integration that's beautiful, I might add, compared to writing to Teams and Tlams and Tulums and Talibis and Talabis and all the different thousands of things some jagoff could have put on their server before. Yeah. It's much more linear. It's much more homogeneous. It's programmable.
Yeah, scale is definitely different for sure. Well, let's pivot for a second because since we're on the Microsoft topic and we could talk about Microsoft probably forever.
God bless us all.
One of the more recent kind of current events is this Lighthouse, right? They announced this at Ignite.
I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of Lighthouse.
Well, I mean, it's public information now, right?
Oh, right. We're good then. The NDA is good. No,
okay.
Yeah,
it's out there. It's in the wild.
Yeah, I've been on the Lighthouse beta now for a while. And what Microsoft is, like, if you distill it all, you bring it all down to what is it? It is the manifestation of Microsoft understanding the market value of SMB, period. It is the understanding that they are finding ways to enable and empower MSPs and multi-tenant owners to bring the extensibility of security, of platform scale, bring the ability to say, you know what, we want that integration of BVoIP, we're just going to script that. That's just going to happen from now on. We're going to inject that every day with a template. Like, that's it. Now my deployment becomes programmatic and orchestrated on things. Like, I don't think people understand how much of an impact the Intune and the extensibility of Intune in a multi-tenant stack are going to have on our industry. You know, in the past, we were inventing.
Hold on. Back up. Okay. Beep, beep, beep. All right. So Patterson has been on the record many times.
Fat joke? Like, that's not cool.
Intune prior to 6 or 7 or 8 months ago was like, don't really go and put too much time into it.
True.
Obviously, things have changed. But the big question here is, you know, like, hey, I'm going to dump my tools, adopt Lighthouse. That doesn't solve my third-party issue.
No.
Right?
Well, no, and that's but here, how about this? And I'm going to do what you do because you did have Mr. Sobel on here not too long ago, and to quote Dave Sobel, and I think it was a very good point. Was, look, do you need to drop everything now and go run into Lighthouse? No. But what you do need to do is recognize this is a big deal for the future, and you should start planning for the future. And I think that's one thing I took out of Sobel's whole entire thing. There's a lot of good points, but I do believe what he said was spot on. People have to start looking at the future. Don't just run at this stuff or go the other way and just bury your head and say, it's nothing. This is not going to be a big deal. Look, pay attention to it, look at it, and start planning for the future. Well, not only for this, but Matt, would you agree that if things are starting to move to the cloud, RMM is going to be used less and less from a device standpoint?
Well, you obviously know where I sit from an advisory role. So I will say that in a metered fashion, it is up to the RMM providers to understand what they can provide from a scale perspective to stay relevant.
And I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm saying in the future.
I think you're 100% right. If we wrote this, you know, and private equity pays me a lot of money to answer this question lately, it seems. They've asked it 4 times. But, you know, I think the answer is yes. If you looked at today, what the workload is for an MSP, it is infrastructural, predominantly. Are we driving towards SaaS PaaS? Better well be. But it's infrastructural. So the RMM is valid. It is valid. Absolutely. For 3 to 5 to 7 years, right? Depending on, I think, what happens with our catalyst here. But it's only valid as the workload shifts out and away from infrastructure and into cloud if they extend and bring that extensibility to bring the same pane of glass, the same business operations, the same things we do, building, taking tickets, working through if they stay relevant and don't fight upstream and say, no, Intune will never matter, it doesn't, right? Then that's the only answer.
Isn't that already happening? SolarWinds announced that back at Inspire.
I may have just presented to 1,000 people about that at SolarWinds this morning. Yes, I might very well have been discussing this again.
I mean, right time, right place, right people. I mean, but so really what we're saying is, hey, Microsoft's starting to automate the low-hanging fruit on their own side, right?
Yeah.
Just tie in and then concentrate on the problems that aren't solved yet. Is that what we're
But
talking
they're
about?
complementary. I think I don't want anybody to miss this real key point. What is one of the biggest struggles today that wasn't before COVID? And I'll give you the answer in a hint. What happens when I want to find a machine that doesn't have my agent and network? You gonna probe Sally's house? What are you gonna do? How are you gonna find them? You gonna okay. What if now magically, just because of something I am, which brings it back to security nomenclature, right? Something I am, something I have, something I possess, right? Or something I know, right? So something I am, I'm Matt, my identity, Matt Lead, Iconic IT is now indelibly said, if I touch a Microsoft product and I scrape the edge of Active Directory, the following things are gonna happen. Now, here's the most critical point that I figured out in the lab yesterday that I've stood on for very long. So you heard it here first. In the past with Intune, if you bound in any other way of out of box, you didn't get any of the Intune management extensibility. You couldn't do scripting, you couldn't do installs of applications, you could only do some cursory things. Guess what? 2000 H2 healed. It will now, if you simply sign into Teams and you have an Intune policy set, it'll install things. Can you imagine where that would have validity? Oh, maybe installing my RMM and ensuring that because that RMM agent got installed on Sally's home computer because she decided to use that instead of her work computer because it's a little slower and she likes her gaming setup. Those things play out to a way that I'm going to bill for it. I'm going to bill for those 2 devices that Sally uses because I've set a policy and now it's a immutable fact that once she sends in. So start thinking about how it shifts our world.
Well, Brent comes in and says, come on, guys. No matter how prevalent the cloud is, you still need a device to get there. That's where the RMM tools still needed.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that RMM's going away. We're talking about it's going to be needed less, right? If you're talking about a device that only does, you basically turn it on and it just makes the connection and everything else is being done somewhere else. You don't need all the same tools there locally that you do monitoring and managing the back end, right? Yeah. Am I wrong there, Matt?
That's correct. And I think what I'm getting at is there's going to be a transition. It'll happen over a long period of time.
Yes, it's going to take time.
Workloads, right? If I'm in a world like Iconic, I sign into a laptop that I've never touched before. It installs every tool I have to have, including my RMM. It installs all my security tools. It encrypts my drive. It says to the compliance world, these things happen. And it sets policies that say if it doesn't happen, Matt can no longer touch resources in a titrating value from the most critical down to the least critical, right? And so those things were never possible in infrastructure. You could never indelibly say and immutably say, if that person is them and they sign in, this is what's going to happen. You couldn't do it. So what I'm saying is the RMM should bring the extension of that, the things that Microsoft isn't good at. They don't have templates that allow me to do those things in a mass basis. They don't have multi-management that extends beyond some very cursory data sets, right? So the point being, I think the RMM marriage to Intune provides something the RMMs would have had to code it themselves as an agent with some DNS methodology they could have never forced someone to be tied to, and yet now we have something that I have to touch. I have to touch Teams, I have to sign into email, I have to sign into my tools. All of those things touch the edge of the surface, and now some set process, desired state configuration is executed to bring that tool down to that endpoint. So I'm not arguing we won't have endpoints. I'm arguing that the ways we bring the control of those endpoints being integrated in the operating system have a much higher level of efficacy than if we lend on our traditional tool methodologies. So if that makes sense.
I saw that, George.
Thanks, Brent. I love it.
No, but listen, you can say it out loud, but it's all electronics. It doesn't matter if it's cloud or it's still all equipment, just somewhere else. So Brent said that you see that? Okay, as long as I didn't know if you all could see that. Yeah. So
and I do appreciate the nobility delineation.
Yeah, exactly. But what my point is that it's just going to shift from one place to another. It's still all the same thing. It's just somewhere else.
And nor does fighting upstream change what really comes. And I think that's the one point. And maybe I'm wrong on the timeline, but I don't believe I'm wrong on the momentum and mass that's playing out.
Yeah, I agree.
So basically, if you haven't started looking into Intune, the modern version of Intune, and if you haven't started looking into Lighthouse, which is fairly new to the world from a public standpoint,
yes,
kick the tires a little bit and start paying attention, kind of thing.
And there's tons of resources to understand the context of it out there, right? I mean, there's this really loud, bald guy with a beard that does about 6 hours a week talking about it. So, and a bunch of others too.
Fair. All right. So, and then another thing, Brent, rounding out his comments is So instead of one larger infrastructure, there's now an opportunity in many smaller home-based maybe infrastructure. Sounds like more business to me. So that's not a bad way to look at it, right? I mean,
That's
really
100% my way. Yeah. And having indelible ways to
so,
say, yes, client, if you do this action, I will be billing you for this device, and have that be meaningful in a way where everything's distributed and everybody's been sent to the winds. And, also in a point when, bringing protection to the point of consumption is ever more present and ever more important, right? Where you're saying, if John signs into OneDrive on their computer and they have a keylogger or they have a virus on that machine, I've now just exposed my trade secrets and I have no way to control that. Yes, you do. It's called Intune. And it's called saying, you know what, if you're going to do that, I'm going to own it. And it was funny because my VP of sales, I've told this story many times. I've said this to my people. They don't believe it. He signed in very early on after our merger on his home machine and goes, man, it's all encrypted. My gaming computer has all these tools that are really a problem. And this is ridiculous. Like, what's going on? I told you that indelibly, if you touch this, this is what is going to occur. The systemic failure drops to a systemic failure, right? Predominantly as things become more and more and more normalized and the operating systems get more and more aware, I suppose, of the MDM capabilities.
Yeah, Brent, I'm sure we are working on that. Still too new to be going out and educating. I think we're educating ourselves first, and then we'll be educating on it, just like we educate on everything Microsoft.
Yeah, don't overthink it. Currently, Lighthouse really is just a shell to have multi-tenant view. There's so many challenges there. Some of them under NDA, some of them not. But there's permissions levels, right? One of the things that's challenging for me is I have 5 different regions. I don't want a guy in Dallas to get compromised and blow up my guy in Wichita or gal in Wichita, right? Like, those things are not present. Microsoft doesn't think at scale for what we do. In fact, they have been very limited in their knowledge of how MSPs even function and what we are. I love listening to CEOs and CROs talk about what an MSP is and then go, holy crap, we were wrong. Right? Because they're coming down from a corporate entity. They're coming down from one set of people that manage one organization, and those people are already privileged, and they don't deal with a lot of RBAC, and they don't deal with a lot of privilege type stuff. They don't deal with it. And yet now here we find ourselves in a position where if we continue to operate like that, we will be regulated out of existence as an industry, right? Because we'll be to the destruction of millions. So I think that interesting things today, it's just a multi-tenant shell, but what it really should show you is how committed they are to understanding what we do and what that would mean to RMM providers, what that would mean to people and how they have to pivot. And I guarantee you their boards, they're asking it, right? They're going, okay, right, let's not ignore this. Let's move forward. But you also have this interesting world where if everything was SaaS and PaaS, does the device matter is a real question, right? I think as you start getting into some of those things, as long as the device state can always be guaranteed, does the device matter as much as the plan for everything that happens to that device? And I think that's just some interesting topics and some interesting chances for massive automation and scale.
Interesting, yeah, for sure. So zooming out, right? I mean, we talked a lot about security, we talked a lot about cloud, talked a lot about Microsoft, talked a lot about identity, talked a little bit about outages. So what is like, if you give me your predictions on 2021. By this time next year.
I think 2021 will be a year of regulation and formation. I think we're going to see some critical court battles play out in 2021, like you've got your First American Financial Corp, you've got the regional airport that's suing an MSP and setting a precedence for bare minimum standards, regardless of whether we've ever had a standard that we have to follow, right? I mean, so I think you're going to start having those questions get answered, and I think that they're going to be answered in micro regulations. They'll be answered state by state. They'll be answered in some forms in acts, privacy acts, whatever they may be. But, we'll start seeing the attrition of those in the next 2 years. So, right now I have $3 million in revenue, right? Guaranteed. I do business in New York. If I have a Privacy Act violation, I am subject to those laws and those fines. And depending on the number of records at $1,000 a pop, they could end my company. And yet I'm not adequately prepared for that, even though I'm farther ahead than most MSPs would ever be. So the point being, if you think we're behind, look at what my company that we do business with, the people we support, how far behind they are. What happens when a third of them are facing privacy regulation problems? What happens when they're starting to have regulations on their IT infrastructure, and you're starting to have to follow CMMC, and you're starting to have to follow 800-171 or the Louisiana registration laws in MSP, or all of these things? I think next year is the year where we weed out the people that really understand how much is in our don't know, we don't know bucket. And those guys go away. And we start to feed the ones that go, oh crap, there's so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know. I don't know. I've got to get compliant. I've got to understand what it takes to deliver, what my fiduciary responsibility is. I've got to codify my responsibility well for my clients. I've got to write better contracts. I've got to get better contracts with my vendors. I've got to understand my risk, right? When you start talking cybersecurity, all you're really doing is teaching people the other half of business, right? The first half is, can you balance a checkbook? Fan-frickin-tastic. You can pay your bills. Can you understand, codify, plan, and mitigate risk? That's the question. And I think we'll either have it where we get to force feed it, or we'll get better as an industry. We'll raise the tide. We'll float all boats.
To some degree, Matt, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of outsourcing of this, right? No different than what we do if we were to bring in somebody to outsource HIPAA compliance or to outsource SOX compliance or whatever, right? I mean, there's going to be people out there, you know, just like you would get an Avalara because you're doing business in 5 states and they all have different sales tax rules, right? You need somebody to tell you when something changes. I mean, to expect every org to in-house all of this is not realistic.
Not realistic, but it doesn't have to be. What you're seeing is, why do we make an argument to our clients that an MSP is better for them than 3 people that work for them? It's economies of scale, it's scale of process, it's automation scale, it's all of the things that bring scale to the same deliverable. Well, guess what? There's people that do that for us, right? They're generally the corporate blokes that have already existed and have been doing this for corporate. Like, let's not lie to ourselves. We're behind a decade and a half. As MSPs, we have been doing antivirus. We're good, great, antivirus is there. But has anybody had a risk profile or an asset value, an asset loss estimation? Has anybody done any of the things to help you understand at a small to mid-sized business level what it takes to do cybersecurity effectively? And the answer is materialistically no, right? I mean, those things just aren't there. So we're going to get it one way or the other. I think you're seeing the momentum, though. Pax8 has a program. ConnectWise has a program. Kaseya has a program. TigerPaw will be exclusive. SolarWinds. Everybody has a, hey, MSPs, let me help you learn more. Let me help you see more. Granted, are there product pitches and vendors and partners in that? Yeah. But as your knowledge and nomenclature goes up, the ability to understand what the pieces look like and what the puzzle hole looks like gets better. And I think that as you start to understand this partnering with experts aspect of it that we already live on, you'll find your middle ground somewhere over time.
So it, you know, because there's so many people creating so many of their own frameworks,
right?
Is CMMC, which is the government defense contractor kind of grid for security, is that now more or less what everybody's pointed to, or is that not the standard?
Yeah, no, that's a cool question. So there's no pointing yet. I mean, you certainly have vectors that are pointed in a direction, right? So you have your PCI DSS, you have your, you know, your CMMC, and you have those things, but they're usually vectored. What I think is happening, though, is each of those pieces has basically the same rough components, right? They have categorization that says this is for detection, this is for response, this is for recovery, this is for those things. So it's really just like a prescription for how you do something, you know, but your frameworks vary from, you know, for example, ConnectWise is very tactical. It's very do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. And you have other ones that are much more educational and maybe a little bit more where you have to think and try to learn and codify your own stuff and how it functions, right? But at the end of the day, all we're all trying to do, all of them, is try to figure out how to escalate that knowledge so that people get the entire totality of security. Now, as to why CMMC, in my opinion, is probably the most scalable methodology for us to extend that out, the way they thought about it was in gradients, right? 1 through 4, where 1 basically means I got a firewall and I lock the doors and I don't put kerosene lamps up. And then 3 being I do most things in most categories and they're very efficacious and somewhat mature. And a 4 and a 5 meaning I've demonstrated taking myself from a 3 to a 4 and a 4 to a 5 in capabilities and abilities. And so I think that what you then have that in conjunction with is capitalism playing out, in the sense that if I start saying, in order to get cyber insurance, we need to find out what asset class you're in from a classes of insurance, right? And a 0 would mean no CMMC, and a 1 would mean a 1, and a 2. I now have classes of insurance. I can do actuarial data on the loss variance between those classes of insurance. I can determine efficacy as an insurer, right? Banking, I can put risk on that. At the end of the day, if I have a personal guarantee and my company goes under, great, they are guaranteed to get the no money I have. Fantastic, right? So you start having this situation where the banks take that loss and destroy our economy there. So they're all searching for some gradient. My thought is the ability to separate on CMMC, where you pay an auditor to come in and say, I'm doing these controls effectively, is better. Now, I don't want anyone to misconstrue my statements. Compliance is not security. I can scope my answers to a compliance question in a way that I am so freaking insecure, but I pass. Yes, I do. Right? I've seen a SOC 2 where the SOC 2 is only on their ConnectWise. Great. What about all the other shit you do? Right? Like, the reality is compliance is not security. It's a good measure of the differences between different organizations and their ability to manipulate compliance and sometimes security, but it is a start, right? It's an audited start where you get some human conjecture as to, this is BS. Manage is not all you do. I need more. And the more that the auditors understand those businesses through trial and error, the better those type of compliances get, in my opinion.
Hey, George, before we get to the end of the hour, I always do this to you because you can't, we are talking about the bus and the trip and the tour. I think you have to ask Matt the most important question of the day, and I'm sure he'll agree.
It's the question that everybody had to answer. What was your favorite food along the trip?
Man, mine was straight up Subway.
Oh,
no, man, I'll be honest. It was that little tiny place in Santa Fe that we got dragged to by a crazy truck driver, right? Like, he was going to make that hell or high water. And the food there was fantastic.
That was the favorite one?
I definitely like Fogo de Chao, but that's something you find in big cities you can go do.
Right. But
this was one of those just, we showed up after a really long wait and it didn't suck, right? It was in
When did we get there? What was the food? I don't even remember what we got there.
It was like bar fare. I mean, it was all, wings but it the beer made it amazing. So,
right.
Yeah.
That was, I thought you were going to say one of the food trucks, but.
No, food trucks were good, but I think it was the experience and camaraderie of after the event that was the most valuable to me. The event's great. I love meeting MSPs, but I meet MSPs all day. I don't get to hang out with you guys all day. So not on that side of the glass, I will.
And you don't get to drive across the desert to some place in the middle of a neighborhood to eat?
Yeah, and park down a very sketchy neighborhood.
And get stopped twice by Border Patrol.
Well, I thought it was really interesting that Slade wanted to sell you to Border Patrol, though.
Yeah, he did.
Got a foreign national back here. Yeah, that was good.
That guy wanted no part of it. He knew exactly. They already knew who everybody was in the vehicle anyways.
Yeah, they had that data a long time ago, our cell phone telemetry, right? So, but anyways.
Oh, boy. So, Matt, you talk a lot in a lot of places all week. How do people find you, follow you, figure out where you're talking next?
LinkedIn. I usually am very, 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 very active on LinkedIn, Cyber Matt Lee. I will accept pretty much any connection request. I really am out here for the purpose of, granted, there's some vetting process that goes into it, but just cursory. But, I don't share any privileged information. And it really is the, rising tides float all ships. I want people to be aware of what's out there. I want people to understand what's happening in the industry. And I try to share what I come across. And every now and again, George will beat me to one, but that's probably the best way to follow me.
So I know Brent was really topical. Yes, Brent, we just call him the beard. That's what we call him. And yes, CMMC is taking over defense. So there's that.
Yep.
Ken, how do people find you? Online, email, I don't know, wherever you want to be.
I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm not as open as Matt is on LinkedIn, but if you're an MSP and you want to connect on LinkedIn, I definitely will connect with you. It's just Ken Patterson. You can email me anytime, kpatterson, Patterson @pax8.com. And I am pretty open to communications. My whole job is the community. So anybody wants to reach out, they can definitely grab me there.
Here's the reason I'll accept any request. 5 seconds with OSINT, and you've already got everything about me anyway. It doesn't matter where I have that, right? So I'm already a target as it sits.
It could be the bots, man, the bots. So stay tuned, guys. We will make sure this recording gets online, just like all the other ones, so that you can rewind, fast forward, pause, send Matt Lee and Ken Patterson mail saying, what were you drinking that day? And you'll find that at mspinitiative.com. You'll see our LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, all that jazz there.
What's up, Alan Miller? Sorry, had to get my shout out.
That's right. All good. So make sure you follow us online. All of these videos go back to March. We have future ones coming up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And stay tuned for future news because, we're trying to be out there and the year is not over yet. Let's make it happen. Stay in touch, everyone.
Thanks for having me, guys.